Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Hertz versus hue, multiple octaves, 3D shape. In other words, comparing pitch measured in hertz to the hues in the color wheel, focusing in on multiple octaves by visualizing a 3D shape, something similar to a spiral staircase. The challenge being to map color, which doesn't naturally have that 3D shape, onto the spiral staircase by adding another dimension other than hue, something like lightness or brightness. So get ready and some coffee, because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin'. For that, you need Microsoft Excel. You're in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay, because we basically built this from a blank worksheet but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you could begin back there, or just work in the part of the worksheet that we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook, though, 5 tabs down below. We've got the hex tab, which we might look at shortly later. We've got the fretboard tab, which is very colorful. We'll explain why shortly. The example tab, having in essence the answer key. The practice tab has pre-formatted cells, so you can practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay, because we're continuing work in the blank tab, where we built this from scratch, and we'll continue to work in essence the blank part of the worksheet, practicing not only our music skills but our Excel formatting skills as well, for formatting's sake. Let's go on over to the fretboard tab to get a reminder of our objective. I know it's very colorful, but bear with us here. Use color as efficiently as possible, as God intended, as a tool, not as a political warhammer to smack all the normal people until they die a glittery, bloody death. No, it's a tool, and in this case, to help us understand music theory, and more specifically in this case, to help us understand the fretboard. Typically, when people assign colors, they usually just randomly pick colors and then assign them to the collection of notes they are interested in, such as in this case, the collection of notes around the C major, or possibly just choose some notes within that collection of notes. Like, for example, the 1, the 3, and the 5. We might then remove the colors for the rest of them. That is great. But instead of randomly picking the colors, we'd like to have a color set by mapping the color wheel onto the pitch wheel that's going to be the same for all of the colors. That gives us a better kind of association and some approximation of the distance or change between the colors being analogous to the distance between the pitches. So that is what we have done here. You can see the C here to go to the C here to the C here. Helps us to map it out. We can remove the colors that we don't want if it's too bright and we just want to look at a few of these notes. We can, of course, do that as well. If I change the key that we are in, then notice that if we move this whole shape up, so the Ionian was up here, we're going to have unique colors for all of the notes. Or we can have a color system that remains the same based on the modes, so that when I move it up, I'll have the same colors that will have the set that will allow me to easily see the modes as we move up through the 12 7-note collections. Okay, so that's going to be the general idea, but now we want to add the idea of the octaves, right? So when I look at this going from here to here to here, I don't have the added dimension of basically I'm up an octave. On a piano, we typically see that quite clearly because it's all linear. On a guitar, we're really usually just saying, hey, look, I'm just looking for a C. I'm just looking for an Ionia. I'm just looking for a root. I'm not trying to get into the complexity of, is it a 4, the 4th, or the middle C, or whatever. But we should, once we kind of understand where all the notes are, we want to then get into, well, what octave am I in? Is this an inverse chord, and all that good stuff? So to do that, we're going to map on our fretboard over here. So we have another fretboard where now we're basically going to count it up. Now the color's a little bit off because I'll show you why there's an issue once again with the inefficient way that throughout history the octaves have been assigned. It's really kind of wonky. We'll talk about it. So normally this would be green, but you can basically see here we got from here, and then it gets lighter, and then it gets lighter. You can see on the fretboard we're getting lighter as we go to the right side. So once again, that's going to give us a color cue to be able to now work with the octaves, and I can start to say, well, look, this has the same color as this one. Those are both middle C's, C4. We have repeat notes on the guitar. And whereas if I go up this way to this one, this is a C4 to a C5, which I can see by the lighter color, which again, it should be green, I would think, but we'll get into that. I'll tell you why that's the case. And then if I want to remove some of these formattings, I can remove them by going up top and remove the ones I don't want. There's a lot more rules here because we had to put the pitches for all the different octaves, but you could still remove the ones that you don't want. You know, you could find them. I would suggest narrowing them down and then going back in. I'm just going to remove some of them just so you could see. And so now I've removed some of those. And if I want to put this back on, I grab the formatting here and I can put it back on so I don't have to worry about it messed everything up. And we're back to where we started. So you can still kind of play with this. If this is too colorful, the glitter is smashing you in the face, and that's too much color. You could the Warhammer's taking you out. You're like, I can't take it. Then you can remove the colors that you don't need, so you can focus on one thing at a time by changing the rules and then apply it back on with this. We'll show you how to make this later, but for now, let's think about the idea of what this means and how these color system would work. So let's go into the blank tab, where before we basically thought this through, mapping the two wheels, right? We have the pitch wheel and we have the color wheel. The pitch wheel naturally has a spiral effect. So usually we start thinking about A through G sharp, so people start to learn the pitch of 440 because that's where it starts. That's what we think of naturally as the first octave. We will see that the naming convention starts to name middle C at the C, which is kind of weird. That, again, that doesn't really fit what we normally think of. You would think that the naming convention would not be starting at a 4, first of all, for middle C. You would think it would start at 0, and you would think it would start at A. So that's going to mess us kind of up. And I really want to point that out because, again, it's just one of these things that people just kind of take for granted. They're like, that's just the way it is. But it's weird, okay? That's not the way it should be. That's not the way we would do it if you did it from scratch right now. So I want to point that out because it's causing problems that people just kind of accept. They've accepted it their whole lives because they learned it when they were 4, and they don't really see that it's weird. But it's weird. It shouldn't be that way. But anyway, so now we made this into a circle. Right? We made this into a circle so that it has 360 degrees. And then we wanted to take the colors and do the same thing. So we took the color wheel. We measure color by the length of the wave, by length of it, right? And then we converted that to the color wheel, and we used the color wheel that's basically already been generated that has 360 degrees. So now I can say I have 360 degrees for the pitch, 360 degrees for the color wheel, noting the color wheel was fudged because it's a linear thing, and they kind of fudged the end of it. That's a technical accounting term. They fudged it. They threw in a plug at the end of the color wheel so that it would blend back into red. So when you get to magenta at the bottom of the color wheel, that's the fudging part. That's the plug to get it go back to red. Okay, but that works perfectly for our analogy. So that works. So now we've got our color wheel. So now we can map them 1 to 1 so that I can assign the A is always going to be red, right? So now we have said that we have the red here. How did we get the hex? We basically asked ChatGTP. We said, ChatGTP, I have the HLS numbers from the color wheel. I want you to convert those to HEX or hex. That's the number within Excel that we can pick up. Now remember that color has hue. That's what we typically think of with the wavelength. How long is the wavelength to make the color? That's what we call hue, right? But we also have other dimensions to color like lightness and brightness, for example. So that means that this one, we want the lightness and brightness to be so that the color pops as much as possible for our middle octave, which would typically be around middle C or the middle of the piano, for example. or I'm going to say it should be from 440 hertz, or the A to G is what we're going to assign it to. We'll get into that in a second, but those are the brightest colors. And then we're gonna say if I go an octave down, which I would think would be going, if you're on octave 0 or the middle octave, down in my numbering system would be -1. We'd go lower, left hand on the piano. Then we're gonna get this numbering system. How did we get there? Because you can't get there by just saying that the pitches with the pitch number. You can get there with the pitch number with audio, but you can't get there with the wavelength number for color, right? So what are we going to do? All I'm going to do is say, hey, look, I'm just going to keep the hue the same, but the brightness on this one is at 50%. That's how you get the popping brightness, not brightness, lightness. And then so this one, I'm going to say I want you to take it down 2 notches from 5 to 3. So this one has a lightness of 3, making it go towards black. It makes it more towards black. And this one is going up. So that means from a normal convention, it would be from middle C to the 5 range, right? C5, right? But I would call it middle being 0, and this is going up to 1 if we were to rename the octaves properly, right? And I'd like to go 2 octaves each way. So you might ask once again, how do I get these numbers? One way is to ask ChatGTP, or you can actually do a converter, converting the 360 or HLS to the HEX. But when you do the conversion, then you also have to, that gives you the hue, but you also have to think about the lightness, which is the thing that's gonna change the shading closer or lesser to black. All right, let me show you that real quick so you can kind of see how you might use ChatGTP, for example, or whatever AI you like. I like ChatGTP because it's so nice and it's encouraging. It tells you good job and everything, so it's great. So it's my best friend, man, I tell you. Anyway, take these numbers and change the lightness to 0.1, and then make an Excel worksheet showing the HEX numbers and format the cells, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste this thing and say, and so these are the normal lightness with a 0.5. And I'm going to say change it to 1 and ask it to actually give me an Excel sheet that shows me the HEX numbers and format it so I could just copy and paste it. So this is quite useful if it could populate that. So it did it here. Wait, it didn't do it yet. Hold on, it's thinking. So here we have it. So then I can download this and see what it gives me. See what it gave me. And notice it didn't do it because it didn't format the cells. So I'm gonna you didn't do it, ChatGTP. I'm gonna try not to get mad at you because you're my friend, but you need to do it again. I'm gonna try to, so I'm gonna say, please do it again. I'm gonna try to be nice here one more time with a please. You probably don't need to say please to a chat thing, but I'm gonna try to be nice before I have to get crazy with you if you don't get the job done this time. ChatGTP, trying to be nice here. Let's see what it gives us. Okay, so you can see it gave us here's the original, and it gave us this one, which is quite dark because I told it to change the lightness to 0.1, and that would be like 2 octaves down. So I just wanted to show you, then you can double check this by basically putting it into a converter tool so you can check those numbers. But I just want to give you the general process that was used to go from this HEX to here, which has the same color, but we're changing another component, which is lightness, which is now going to be representing us going an octave down in pitch, 1 octave up in pitch. So I'm going to change this to a 1 now. So I'm going to say this is 1 down and this is 1 up in pitch. And then I'm going to add the other 2, which I just asked ChatGTP to provide, and hopefully ChatGTP got it right. So I believe this one has these numbers HLS converted to the HEX with a lightness of 0.5. That's what these colors are. And then this one, I forget which way to go to get more towards black, but I'm going from 0.5 up 2 units and then down 2 units. So 0.5 to 0.7 to 0.9, and then on the lightness, and then 0.5 to 0.3 and then 0.1. I believe that's right, to give us these numbers, and these numbers are then giving us this cell. So in other words, this is 66000. If I go into my color thing up top right here and look at it, it's in here, it's down here, it's at the HEX 66000. So okay, that's it. So this hex number takes into consideration not only hue, but also lightness and brightness and the other color factors. So I imagine it as like a giant table that has no real rhyme or reason to the numbering system other than it's a giant table. Whereas when I look at the 360 thing, it's been bent into a wheel. So that's something that we can kind of visualize with our mind a little bit better. So therefore, I would visualize it as a wheel and then convert the wheel to the hex with a converter or with a ChatGTP, and then mess with the other parameter that we're looking at, which is the lightness, in order to simulate the 3D component that's natural to pitch sound, not natural to color. And that's what we'll do. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So now that we have this, let's map this out. I'm going to copy this skinny. I'm going to put the skinny over here. And I'm going to give me my headers. It's going to be a note number. We're going to have the note number. And then this is going to be, let's say, local note number. And this is going to be the absolute note number. Meaning I'm going to count 1 to 12 versus counting past 12. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. And this is the old octave convention, meaning the numbering system that we've inherited from the piano, which again is a mess. New octave. Let's correct it and think about it how we would think about it if we were to do it from scratch today. Again, I know this bothers people that have learned music since they've been like 4 or something. And they're like, dude, that's just the way it is. I know you think that, but it's wrong. It's still wrong. I'm sorry. So I'm going to go up top. I'm going to go Home tab, Font Group. Let's make this. It's like Mozart or whoever did this made it confusing on purpose. I know he's a genius and everything, but he's messy. He's gaslighting us. That's not how it should be. For crying out loud. Stop with the craziness. Stop with the craziness. I'm going to fix it. You can't fix it or HR will come after you. I don't care what HR does. I'm going to fix it. You could yell at, okay, no one's going to listen to you. Okay, whatever. I don't care. All right, so this would be the normal notes. Now the absolute note numbers are going to be the same right now. So I'm going to say, because we're in the middle point of that, normally it's going to be starting at 440 Hertz. So remember, like normally when you think about the pitch, everybody knows the pitch. Not everybody, but most people, if they know any like measurements in Hertz, they know 440 as the A, because that's where we started the musical alphabet. So that's where you would think the pitch would start, right? At A, at 440 Hertz. So then, but the old octave system, well, let's add the letters first. So that's going to be, I'm going to say this equals this A. So we have 12 notes, which I'm going to number. I'm going to copy this down. There's our notes. So we have these 12 notes. And let's copy this down one more. These 12 notes represented here. The sharps and flats are represented by lower cases. So this, for example, is A sharp or B flat, right? So that's going to be our system. Now, you would think that these would all be what you would call middle. That would be the middle octave, the one in the middle of the piano, right? But no, what they decided to do is they decided to put the C4 as the middle. And instead of calling it the middle, they used numbers, which I'm cool with. I like numbers, but they called it a 4. Now, why? So again, so there's two things here that are wacky. One, why did you make the middle? Why did you make the middle at the C? And the answer, of course, is because that's whatever the favorite key for whatever reason which is on the piano, and therefore we're going to start the octave from the C. Now, that doesn't really make sense when we zoom out and say, hey, look, there is nothing really special about the key of C. All 12 collections of 7 notes are the same from a logistic standpoint, from a math standpoint. So that doesn't make sense to us, but we can kind of see why it's happening kind of on the piano. It shouldn't happen even on the piano because it still causes all these problems because the naming convention starts at A, right? So you would think the middle bit would be from A to G sharp, right? And why did you call it a 4? So what would I normally call it? I would call it normally a 0. It would be in the middle, right? And then we would go in the middle and we would go like 2 octaves up. And then we'd go 2 octaves back or something like that. But no, they started at 4. Why? Because they didn't want to deal with negative numbers, you would assume. So that means that if I start at 4 for middle C, and then I go back towards the left hand, I have enough room not to have to go into negative numbers. And so that's possibly most likely why they picked a 4. But that's silly because you'd have beautiful symmetry if you made it a 0. So what I'd like to say is I'd like to say the 0 should be up here at A. That's what I would call it, right? That would be the middle point. The middle octave should be starting at 0, and then we go 2 octaves up towards the right hand on the piano and 2 octaves back, or however many octaves you want to go, which is symmetrical, even numbers going up pitch-wise, odd numbers going, or negative numbers going down pitch-wise. That just visually is so much more nice, I feel like. But that's not what they did. So we have to deal with that. The 4 is it's not a huge problem, but it does still cause some problems. So let me show you why. So if I say this is going to be a 4, it goes down to here, and then above it, that means that this B is a 3. So that's going to be a 3 up top. What I'd like to say is this is all the middle bit from A to G. This is the middle octave, which I'd rather name not 4, but 0. Right? This is what I would do, right? Okay. This is not just me. I feel like anybody that has any kind of like engineering or like systems building would do it this way, right? And I feel like, any case. Okay, so that means, so let's color code this so we can get an idea, because it's going to get kind of messy. I'm going to say this is going to be orange. I'm going to make the middle bit orange. I'll make it this orange, which is a standard orange, and put some brackets around it. Okay, and then, but the middle bit for this numbering system starts down here. That's the normal numbering system. It starts at C. I'd rather start it up here. This is the way I think it would be better done. And this is the way I'm going to assign the letters to our color system, the way I think is correct. So, and so this, I'm going to make this blue up top. I'm going to make this the light blue to show you the stagger, which is like a problem, right? It's like, this is off. This is like, that's weird. Okay, and that means that if I repeat this down here, from a local numbering system, we would be repeating up again. Let's do it on the letters first. It'll be easier to see. This equals the A up top. The A then repeats, but at a higher pitch. We're going down towards the floor, but it's a higher pitch, just like on a guitar, right? And so I'm going to say then the numbers that represent those letters would be still, the local numbers would be 1 through 12. So that means that we still have this 4 that's going down to this C. So we don't get to the next bit up, which would be a 5. C5 doesn't start to here. And then again, that C5 is going to copy down past here. So I'll make this again another color. I'll make this blue again on this side. So that's the issue. Whereas I'd rather call it, this is going from the middle point, which I would call 0, not 4. And then when I go up towards the right hand on the pitch, if you were on a piano, it should be a 1. That's how it should be, okay? And then if I go with the left hand, it should be a 2. Now again, if I learned this when I was 4, which I didn't, maybe it wouldn't bother me, but it should bother me. It should bother you. If you learn this with your 4 and you're not bothered, that's because your head is messed up. Okay? It's not right. It's not the way it should be done. That's the thing. Okay? I don't care. I'm going to say, all right. And then the absolute numbering system, we're going to say this is going to be this plus 1. I'm going to keep it numbering up. Instead of starting again, the 1 being an A, I'm going to say, no, we started the numbering system for A being at point 0 or octave 0, right? We're going to imagine, or the middle octave, 440. And then I should start that at 0, by the way, because it would be a better numbering system. We talked about that before, so you can fault me on that if you want. I caved to the pressure on that one because I think it's most people relate a 1 to an A, but it is what it is. We're going to keep that way. That means that this is going to be a 13 because 13 minus 12 would give us 1. So this would be the absolute numbering system starting at that middle point if we call the middle A. Now, again, you could use some other systems. I think like the MIDI system wants to go way back to only count in the positive direction, right? Meaning they'd like to name like something close to 0 or close to the bottom of the pitch range as a 1 and then only count upwards. That's nice, but I kind of like the middle place is where you spend most of your time. So I would think if you gave an absolute numbering system from a functional standpoint, you would want to name the middle point with the local numbers, right? Should be at the middle point that you play in. And we don't always play in the key of C. That could be the argument if everybody played on the piano. And even on the piano, that's not the case anymore because people try to play in other keys, right? But we do usually play in the middle. Even if you're on the guitar, we play something that's in this range. So I don't want to name it like 25 or something. If I had an absolute system, I want to name this the middle, which and that means when I go below that in pitch, I'm going to have to use negative numbers. I should start at 0 though instead of 1. I think that would have been good, but again, we made that argument before and why I didn't do that. Okay, so then, all right. So in any case, let's make this blue and bordered. Okay, so now we have something, and so I'm going to make this blue and bordered. So now we have 2 octaves. Now the middle octave then is going to be this one from a color standpoint. And so I'm going to say, boom, that's the middle bit. So we're going to assign from A to A this way, even though you're going to say, and this is where the color was messed up over here because I let them, I got persuaded that I should bring this down here, right, and start at the 4 so that all of the middle colors will be on C4. But to me, that's not right? That's not the way it should be. So I'm going to put it up here, which means we have to see that the middle, I'm going to visualize the middle range as the musical alphabet, starting at 440 Hertz, starting at the A to the G. I'm not going to visualize the middle range from the C to the C, although I need to also know that convention because that's the numbering convention that you're going to see. So that means this color convention is going to have these first 3 colors at the A3 range up top. Now this won't matter if we're visualizing the fretboard just in color alone. In other words, if I'm looking at the fretboard and I'm not worrying about the pitch, I just want the colors, then it's going to look like this, and I'm not going to worry about the fact that this is a C4 and a C5 and so on and so forth. And these will all be green. I also kind of like this being green other than red for my root. I kind of like the root being green because red's a little too, I don't know. I kind of like the green. They both would work. But so over here, same thing, but this should be green, but I made it red because they convinced me, and I was like, now I'm thinking, no, I'm right. I'm not going to change it. So we'll build it the right way. So that's what we're going to do it over here. All right, so then we're going to say, if we take both of these, I'm going to say this is going to be I'm going to give it the absolute number. I'm going to say and to tie it to the letter, and then I'm going to say and again to tie it, wait a sec, and to tie it to the letter, and then I'm going to say and then I'm going to pick up the old octave. So this would be a 1. I call it note 1 if I number it, and then it's an A, and then the old system would mean it's an A3. So let's do another one and say the new system, the way I would like to do it, this is old and new, the logical way. It's not the new system, it's the logical way. We're going to say it would be a 1, and it would be an A, and it would be the middle, which is a 0. A 0. Okay, let's copy that down. A 4. Why would you pick a 4? What is that? And then up here, pulling numbers out of nowhere. Out of nowhere. Okay. All right. So let's do that. And then we'll make this blue and bordered. Okay. All right. So then when I go down this way, it's higher in pitch. So now I'm going to say this is 1 octave up, copying the higher color up here. Now again, the higher color doesn't start where the 5s start under the old convention. It starts once we go through 1 octave, starting at 440, which is what everybody normally thinks of as the starting point of the first octave. All right? So that means we have a little bit of this disconnect right here. That's the thing that's going to throw us off. But we're not going to let it bother us that whoever the genius musicians are gaslighting us with their naming conventions. I don't care what you call it, Mozart. You might be a genius, but I'm going to make music that stupid people can understand too. I'm going to insert this, and then we're going to let's shift this down. You don't have to be a genius to read this music. You don't have to learn it you don't have to warp your brain when you're 4 in order to not think about all the stupidness that is happening around here. Okay. I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to put, let's go back. This is going to go back the other way. So if I go back, let's start with the letters. Now we're going in the negative direction, or towards the left hand on the piano. All right, it's going A to A. That's great. So boom. So now we're going backwards. These are the local numbers. Now, if I start at this as the center point and I use the absolute numbering system going backwards, I end up with negative numbers. Again, if you've worked with MIDI stuff like that for programming in music, what they did is they started at like a baseline, I believe, of 0. So they only count upwards. But again, I don't like that from a functional standpoint, from an actual musician standpoint, because again, then you're using absolute numbers that aren't 1 through 12 in the range most often used, which is like the top string of the guitar. So no, we have to have negative numbers going back functionally would be the best way to go. So it's not just a program, it's not just, we're trying, so again, this would probably be better being 0, because now I have this being 0 up top and then it goes backwards. But that's the sacrifice that we've talked about before. And I'm not gonna beat myself up over it. I'm not gonna try to justify myself to you on that any longer. The argument's been made, and we're gonna move forward on that. We're just gonna move forward on that one. Okay. So then, this goes from C to C. Okay. So let's make this blue now. I'm going to say this is blue and bordered, and then this is blue and bordered. So here's our stagger. Boom. So I'd like to say that these are all now -1. So I'd like to say this whole thing is middle 0, right? Middle is 0. And then when you go negative, you go -1, right? That would make more sense. So now I'm going negative, nice and symmetrical, going back this way. I asked my best friend ChatGTP about it, and the ChatGTP thinks that this is the way to go too, if we were doing it like from scratch. Just so you know, it's not just me. I've consorted with, okay, others. I'm gonna say home tab, let's make this blue as well. Blue, and boom. And then we'll copy this. We'll copy both of these and paste formulas, and then we'll make that boom boom, and then that's going to be going down. So 1 octave down is going to be this color. So bam. So that makes sense. All right. Except we got this weirdness happening here, and so now we're going to say this would go down to 2. So now we're going down to 2. You can see why on the piano they were scared of negative numbers. Mozart's so smart, but he can't even go negative. He's scared of negative numbers. Wussy. I'm going to make this one green. We're going to go, so this is, bring this up one more time. Oh no. Let's bring this up like this. Boom. All right. So then the letters, if we bring the letters up, we bring them up. Boom. All right. And then we bring these up. Boom. So now the negative numbers are going 2 octaves that way. And then this one's going to go up to C only. That's where the stagger happens. And then these should all be green now. Let's make this, it should be green only down to here though. That's where the stagger happens. Hopefully I get my color convention right. Green, this is green, and these are gonna be -2. So that's what I would call it from the octave. If we start at 0, now we're going 2 octaves lower in pitch for the whole range of A through G. But in their convention, it would only go to the C, and then we would be down to 1. So, right? And so we don't quite get to 0 because you run out of keys on the piano unless you got a super long piano, in which case Mozart would break down. His head, his giant, massive, smart head would blow up because its weakness is negative numbers, apparently. And so then they found its weakness, and then his head would blow up and you'd go crazy. Okay. Anyways. Let's copy these up. We'll copy these and paste the formulas only. And then we'll make that green and bordered. And then this is going to be 2 octaves, so it's going to be darker. That's what we're going to represent it color-wise. So hopefully I got those colors correct. I feel like the one that they gave me was darker still than that. Here to here, so I might have to check those numbers. But I think those look pretty good. That's a red, that's a red, that's a red. I think that's right. And then I have to go up one more down this way in the up direction, which should be easier to think about usually. So now we're going to go local distance. Let's do the local numbers again. If I copy this out, it would go from A to G sharp. I'm going to make these green because I'm just going every other one, not this one. Not you. Not you. All right, and then we'll copy this one down. And these will be green. Okay, green and bordered. And then the absolute numbers are going to be this plus 1. So absolute numbering system, we would be up to 25, right? Because 25 minus 12 would be 1, or 25 minus 24 would be 1. And under the old naming convention, we'd still have a 5 going down to here, and then it would start at the C to be a C6. C6 starts there. That's weird. That's where the stagger happens. That's where the stagger happens. That's when the drunk guy walks out of the car and that stagger happens. You're like, oh no, this is no good. You were staggering when you were driving the car, for crying out loud. Now you're staggering when you're out of the car. Just saying, just not good. Okay. And then this is going to be, let's copy this. And then we're going to say, paste the formulas. And this is going to be then a 2. So it should be a 2. That's where it should be, starting at the A, not at the C, if we were doing it systematically, properly, in a way that normal people would comprehend. If they weren't put in secret codes. This isn't like, what's that movie where they have to have all the secret codes and this isn't like the Da Vinci Code, okay? Where you just got a bunch of nonsense in there that sounds cool because it's like has tricky codes in it. No, we want people to understand it. I'm gonna make it like, so this is 2 octaves up. Let's copy this and paste it down here. Boom. Okay. So I think that is it now. So that's going to be our system. So it's deceptively complicated. Again, it should be easy, but you get the idea, right? So the idea would be we have the pitches starting at 440 and going up 1 octave in the middle, which is the orange. And then, of course, we can map on the color pitches that are mapped out on a 360 system, which would be these colors. And then when we go up past that middle point, I could keep counting up this way, which will show us that we're in the octave up. And I could show that color-wise, but I can't choose different hues. The hues don't have that characteristic. We then use another component of color similar to brightness, but lightness, which is going to be taking it closer or further away from black, I think is the idea. So this is when I go up, it's going to get lighter, less away from black. And then if we go up 2 octaves up here, okay, so that gets messed up. However, on the normal naming convention, because the piano thinks of the 4 as where they start the octave numbering system, and they start the octave numbering system with a 4, which again, like when I was a kid, like when I hear this stuff, I automatically think there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason why. I mean, there is none a lot of the time, right? So if you're like me and you're always thinking, there has to be a purpose. I'm just going to trust that there's a purpose, other than like, well, they just picked it because they wanted some room to not go in the negative number direction, even though doesn't make any sense. That's like not even a good reason. Right? It's not a good reason, okay? Then you have to realize that no, people just do stuff sometimes, and then it just gets stuck that way. So now we have this. That's kind of ugly, like, okay, because like, so you might not have thought about that before, but it's a little messy. So that's going to mess up our color convention. But I'm not going to move down the middle point color to here. We're just going to recognize that. And then the normal convention, if you were making the thing today, and you weren't scared of negative numbers, you would most likely say the middle point should be at the middle, the axis point of the number line, starting at 440, because that's where we started counting the middle point of the number line, which is an A, not a C. And then you go up to 1 octave up and 2 octaves up, and then back 1 octave back and 2 octave back. Okay, I hope that makes sense. It makes sense to me. I might be weird, but I don't think I am. The more I look at this, I am weird. But I mean, this isn't why. This is not why, though.